Hey, what is going on, everyone? Welcome to the Over the Cap podcast. This is Jason Fitzgerald. You can find me on X at Jason_OTC, or you can email me, jason@overthecap.com. Been a little bit before, since our last podcast that we did here. Time got away a little bit there. Couple of things going on, I guess, at home with the kids, and just some activities they had going on, and then we were away for the Thanksgiving week. We took a trip. Some of you figured out from the Twitter feed. We took a trip to Disney for Thanksgiving. So that was our kind of the 2 weekends there. So there was really no way to get a podcast in there. So kind of back, I think, on our regular schedule now. I don't think we have any trips planned out anymore, so we should be home for most of the time, and hopefully won't get too busy, over the holiday season. So hopefully we'll get some time to do these each week, and then we start to roll into, free agency and everything else. I forgot to mention, joined by Nellie the Bunny. Hey, Nellie. Nellie's half asleep already. Beer of the night. Yeah, it's a sad night. If you're following on YouTube, you can see the sadness. We've got the Michelob Ultra tonight. Michelob Ultra. It's a bad evening. We've got some a lot of Southern Tier in the fridge. We've got some IPA Southern Tier, and I was able to snag a 6-pack of their Christmas beer, which is great. So I was like, I'll get that too. But after being away for the week, I thought all right, we've done enough day drinking to kind of hold me over, I think, for a little bit. So we got to cut back a little. So we figure we'll do 1 week with the low calorie carb, whatever you want to call it, waters, basically. So we got that going on tonight. Hopefully you guys are having something a little bit better than this. But I think by next week, if not next week, then the week thereafter, we'll be back to our regular drinks. That'll be a little bit better than this one. So, where to start? There's really not a ton going on in the league right now. I think right now it's, most of the stuff is pretty slow. We're going into the end of the season. Everyone's kind of jockeying for playoff position. And, you kind of get that, for me at least, how much I really dislike the fact that they have this extra wild card spot. It's just not often enough that I think the league has that many teams that are really deserving of going to the playoffs. I think it does dilute the regular season a little bit. And when you look at some of these teams that are vying for a playoff spot, it's pretty rough. You look at those squads, and obviously Buffalo right now I think is on the outside looking in, and that's a team that the league I'm sure wants to be in there. And they would be a live team, certainly, if they make it in. But, it's just, it really takes things down a notch, I think, when they have the system this way. But, really what I wanted to mainly talk about today, and this has just been kind of building up for a couple of weeks here, and I got a little bit out doing the Badlands podcast on Tuesday. But it's just talking about the Jets. And, once again, a season that started out so promising with, Aaron Rodgers coming in and the defense that was expected to be good and has been pretty good, for the most part. So, it just feels like the year is pretty much done. The Jets had the good win against Philadelphia, and I know right now there's a lot of negativity, so you see people kind of discounting that win. You can discount wins that the Jets have had this year. That, to me, is not one of those games. That was a really good game that the Jets played. I thought that was a legitimate win for the team, much more so, actually, than I thought the Buffalo and the Kansas City wins earlier in the year. Those were games where the quarterbacks just went into this weird... for Josh Allen, it's not that weird. I mean, he does it from time to time, where you just kind of go into this... you only live once, this kind of carefree, you're not really paying attention, and you just do stupid stuff, and it comes back to bite you. You leave a team hanging around, and you make enough mistakes, and that team can win a game. The Jets have been able to do that the last 2 years, pulling some games out like that. Philadelphia wasn't one of those games. but you got the feeling that Philadelphia was like the peak of the team. And whether that was teams focusing in a little bit more, I think if we kind of go back and you look at it, and I believe it's after that game where the coach, Saleh came out and he did that. He's got a lot of similarities to Rex Ryan. At least I think with the attitude, I guess. But anyway, he came out and he talked about embarrassing all the quarterbacks. And, I think teams kind of, I almost feel like that kind of made teams focus a little bit harder on the Zach Wilson-led Jets, at the time, the Zach Wilson-led Jets, and doing what they could to embarrass the Jets offense. And they've really embarrassed the offense over the last couple of weeks. It was a miracle the Jets beat the Giants. That's a game that you just look at that game and you go, okay, we escaped with a win. Like, don't go out there and start saying that was a good win. That was a Giants loss. That wasn't a Jets win. That was a Giants loss. And, after that, you pretty much go out there and, you try hard against the Chargers, but you just can't do anything. And then the last 2 weeks, the last two games, they're both basically the same week, right? The Buffalo and Miami games. I mean, you got obliterated. Offensively, defensively, everything. And, the team is not disciplined. And I get how some of that stuff happens, especially on defense. You're frustrated. You've gotten to the point where you feel as if you're wasting, another season of your career based on how bad the offense is. And this offense stinks. I mean, this is maybe the worst Jets offense that I've ever seen. And that covers a lot of ground. But that's really how bad it's been. I mean, they're just completely ineffective. The first game, the one that was against Buffalo, I was in Epcot for that. I was in Epcot for both of those games. Going around the world drinking some beers while watching the Jets is a better way to watch them. Anyway, I actually, for the first game, it was more listening than watching. I was having some issues for some reason being able to watch the feed, even though I was logging through my cable provider. Was able to watch the one on Amazon with less of an issue. But I make a comment somewhere in there, which was probably true. What's going to happen? The Jets are going to have more net yards on offense, or I'm going to drink more beers. And for a while, it looked like the beer count was probably going to win. It's just a brutal offense. They can't do anything. There's no continuity. There's nothing that's focused on their approach. It's all just like randomness for what they call. It's like the whole offense is hope this guy breaks a big play, hope that guy breaks a big play, hope we don't make a back-breaking mistake, and we'll just punt the rest of the time. And, it's just an awful way to play offense. And you realize that the offensive construction of the team is basically like, okay, we got Aaron Rodgers to say he wants to come to New York and he'll just fix whatever. I see a lot of people who are out there saying, you've got to fire the offensive coordinator. You just went through that and you've gotten worse. So, I think that's something that is really annoying and, really frustrating with watching this team is that they've gone backwards. And, at least last year and the year before that, you would bring in a guy like a Mike White, Flacco occasionally. Flacco didn't score points, but they moved the ball. Maybe Johnson was there for a game. But, they moved the ball. When Zach Wilson was out, they moved the football. And there were times where you looked at it and go, that's what this offense can be. That's what this team can be when they have competent quarterback play. And your focus then strictly becomes Zach Wilson, Zach Wilson, Zach Wilson. Zach Wilson is not the reason the Jets stink this year. If Zach Wilson was a great quarterback, maybe they wouldn't stink so bad. but he's not the reason they stink. Zach Wilson this year was passable as a bottom of the league backup or, third string style quarterback. He wasn't that the last 2 years. The last 2 years he was an XFL quarterback. At least for this season, I would look at that and say, okay, he's just a really bad quarterback that belongs, way down the list of players that would be second stringers, and maybe belongs on the string of third string tier. But Wilson got benched, and they're looking for a spark, and you bring in Tim Boyle, and it's like, well, what are you going to get from that? Not much, but I'm sure that makes Aaron Rodgers happy. And Rodgers returns to practice now. I feel like that's more of a motivational thing than anything else. But I guess we'll wait and see on that. But the Jets, I don't understand the defense that comes up for some of the things that have gone on. Now, there's also people that go to the other extreme, when we're discussing it. But you've got to focus at this point more on Joe Douglas and the job that he's done with the team. And I know he's well respected around the league, and there's a lot of people that like him, but he's been there for 5 years or so now, 5-6 years. And he's one of the longest tenured GMs in the league at this point. Haven't had a winning season, haven't been anywhere near the playoffs. They've barely played a meaningful game in December. You can't look at them and say they've gotten better. They're no better now than they were under Adam Gase. And that's really rough. That's really, really, really bad. And I don't know how people can go out there and with a straight face, I don't know how they said it before, but I still don't know how people are still saying it at times now where they go, oh, he's one of the best GMs in the league. How can you be one of the best general managers in the league when over the last 5 years, I think they're the second worst record in the NFL? I think the only team worse is Carolina over that period of time. How can you say that is one of the best general managers in the NFL? There's no way that you can say that. If you said the Jets were on a path similar like the Jaguars, right? Jaguars stink almost every year. Make the playoffs last year, show a couple signs of life. This year, kind of the same thing. They show signs of life. So you're seeing a team that has improved, year over year over year, even though the front end of those 5 years was pretty bad. Now, a lot of that comes from Trevor Lawrence, but, they also had to draft other players. They went out in free agency and they signed players. So at least if that was the path that you were on, you could say, all right, he's going in the right direction, and you see it with the draft picks, and you see it with this, that, and the other thing. It's just not there. There's nothing that you can really lean back on and say, yeah, this is a top job that's being done. This is a bottom of the league job. When you build an offense like this, and this is not like free agency, you can't build an offense in free agency. He's tried through the draft. Everybody has sucked. Right? Mekhi Becton is always hurt. He's not good. He's okay when he plays. Maybe he can still develop. I don't know. Zach Wilson is one of the worst picks, I think, historically, that you're going to find. Historically meaning in the new rookie contract era. Not going back to the Jamarcus Russells of the world that had these, crazy contracts that came along with being a bad football player. Zach Wilson's about as bad as it gets. And the fact that they doubled down on him just makes it even worse. Denzel Mims, Elijah Moore, just awful. Elijah Vera Tucker, he's good when he plays, but missed half of last year, missed half of this year. If that's a player on another team, he's injury prone. He's no good. Breece Hall, you've seen, you see the explosiveness that's there, but he's not meant to be one of these players that's just going to trudge out these yards. I don't know why the coach is criticizing him. He's not wrong about, what he's saying, but it's like his game is big plays. And you've basically coached him for a year, probably a first year of his career, and then a quarter of this season saying big play, big play, big play. And now when things are going bad, you're expecting him to stand back there and take a 2-yard gain. It's not going to happen. There's players that have been fine. Obviously Sauce Gardner is great. I'd say he fits on the elite football tier. That's defense. Garrett Wilson is very good. Great, probably. I don't think you'd put him in the elite tier. There's too many plays that I think, he misses. And I know that a lot of it gets blamed on the quarterback. But, he does have some issues here and there with some drops. I know some of it is probably figures he's going to get laid out. But the top line receivers usually don't have that. So, if the Jets ever get a decent quarterback, you'll get a better feel for where he is. But he's certainly a good player. And that's pretty much his run. Jermaine Johnson is going to be pretty good. I think he's come along nicely. I think he'll be I don't know if he'll be a top line guy, but he'll be pretty good. But again, that's a defensive player. And you look at what the Jets have done in free agency. They've done a very poor job of trying to build their offensive line. With a couple of their signings they've made. The tight ends both overpaid. I think Conklin is better than people sometimes give him credit for. Uzama's just a body. He's locker room guy. So is Conklin. They're both locker room guys, but to have that kind of spending at tight end between the two players and just have such little production, I mean, that's a whiff. Alan Lazard is a whiff. Corey Davis was pretty much a whiff. Mecole Hardman was certainly a whiff. You go up and down the list, and it's just like miss. You go on the defensive side, and it's completely different. They've done a good job, in free agency. DJ Reed, terrific. Jordan Whitehead has been pretty good. Certainly better this year than he was last year. They've done fine with that. They've gotten good claims. Quincy Williams, terrific find. John Franklin Myers, terrific find. They've done a good job developing players on that side of the football. That's not what wins in the NFL anymore. And I think that's another thing that drives me nuts. And it's not just when discussing the Jets. It's discussing all kind of teams in the NFL. Sorry, I had to fix that there. It's about discussing all the teams in the NFL when you get into these different things where we fall into these traps when we evaluate teams. And it's when we build teams, too. When we go into free agency, and obviously there's more defensive talent in free agency. So, I get that. But a lot of times with the draft and the way that people focus on it and the things that we do, you kind of fall back into these cliches of like the 1985 Bears. And you hear these things like, oh, the Jets have a Super Bowl defense that's being wasted. If only they could find their Trent Dilfer. That kind of team that wins barely exists anymore. The last team that I think you would go to as, not a very functional offense was probably the year the Broncos beat the Panthers. And, that was just a good matchup for them because the Panthers were not a good offensive team. They were a one-player offense. And, Denver had a pretty good defense that year. They could do enough offensively to get through. And then you had Seattle, with the Legion of Boom teams. But, Seattle did have Russell Wilson. And, it's not to say Russell Wilson was great, but, Russell Wilson was a passable, probably above average for the time NFL quarterback. Saying that the Jets they're wasting a Super Bowl defense, this isn't what you need to be a Super Bowl team. Being a Super Bowl team these days really is not defensive focused. Having a Super Bowl defense is basically just having a functional defense. Like Miami's defense, that's not a Super Bowl defense. I think Detroit will have a problem because of their defense. All you're looking for is a defense that is average or slightly above average. And a lot of times, the team might perform above average in part because of the offense. A team's defense, because you're putting teams in, kind of bad spots and stuff like that. But, having these great defenses, it doesn't work in today's NFL. To be able to, go out there and win that way. And to continue to focus on defense all the time with the way that you attack your games, the way that you are building your roster for the most part, it's just it's not the way to go. And some of the things just drive me nuts, and this is where you get into you can't win debates with people that are just fan only and can't take a step back. And I get that, we get that way, I get that way too, from time to time. But you always have to ask yourself, when you evaluate your own team, take a step back and evaluate another team in the league. How would you evaluate that team? Now come back to me and now talk about your team. Because the stuff, and I'll put out something that's critical during a game, and you come back and everyone's, well, the season was only lost because Aaron Rodgers is gone. And obviously, yeah, that's a huge blow. But, then you start running through these track records here. Hold on, my son must have something set up here. I'm assuming that means a Discord call. One of his, I'm sure, Fortnite buddies there. Let me turn that off. The things that come back when it's like, the players that I mentioned before, and it's like they'll run through all the players, and it's like Sauce Gardner elite, Garrett Wilson elite, Breece Hall elite, Jermaine Johnson elite, this player elite, that player elite, Mekhi Becton really, really, really good. It's like, what are you watching? And this comes from every team, right? Every fan base, every team. Like Atlanta, I think, is a great example. Talk about the tight end. Well, he's great. Talk about the wide receiver. He's great. Talk about the running back. He's great. They all have great resumes. But, is that production there on the field? You can make all the excuses in the world. But, look, just as a Jets example, everybody, after his rookie year, was talking up Elijah Moore like he was a great player. A couple games into the season last year, when Elijah Moore was going nuts about not getting any targets, it was like, you've got to get this guy the ball. Like, how are you not getting him the football? How is this possible? He gets traded away, and everyone's like, oh, he sucks. Like, Joe Douglas did a great job getting anything in return for him. I thought he was great. Right? You just told me for the last 32 weeks, the 34, right? However many games we've got. 34 games that he is a elite player, a great second round pick. And then you get like a pick swap and a 5 or whatever it was for him. It's like, oh, that's a great job by Joe Douglas. Whew. Man, we got rid of that guy. Whew. Good job. What? What happened to the last 34 weeks of he's great? We just got to get him the ball. And that's what happens. And you can't have discussions. You can't have rational discussions with people where that's the take on all this. Now, you also can't have discussions with people that just have it out for someone from day one. You like I said, there's plenty of positives that have come from his tenure. But in terms of building a functional NFL team, it's been negative. It hasn't been even remotely positive. You go in the next year, and this is what people are talking a bit about. And, I just pulled up the Jets calculator numbers, again, if you're following along on video. Jets have about $30.3 million in cap room next year. That is the bottom third of the league, but they can bring that number up. You can do a whole bunch of things. So you restructure C.J. Mosley, that creates about 12. Cut Dwayne Brown. I'm sorry, I'm in the wrong year. Let me undo that. Let me do C.J. Mosley's restructure. Creates about 10.5. Dwayne Brown is going to be gone no matter what. You can do whatever you want with Laken Tomlinson. Zach Wilson's the same whether he stays or goes. Aaron Rodgers the lowest he can get. You can restructure DJ Reed. You'll create 7. And that's without adding void years. Cut Uzama, cut Conklin, restructure Quinnen. That's about $10 million in savings on that restructure. John Franklin Myers, you can restructure him. That saves you 9. You're not going to touch Alan Lazard because that's just a bad deal. Quincy Williams doesn't really get you much, but let's just restructure it anyway. That'll save you 3.6. You do those numbers and you're up to about $83 million in cap room. Now, one of the things with the cap space right now, I'm estimating a 255 cap. I've been told that that's probably going to be much lower than that. It's all relative. The position in the league is still all relative. We'll get some clarity on that, I think, in about a week and a half. Usually that's when the first set of numbers get floated around as to what they expect the cap to be. Usually they give a range, $3 to $5 million, something like that. And so we'll get an idea. There's still a lot of borrowing, and there's money payback still on the PA's end of stuff that's, I think, bringing those cap numbers down from where they should be. But we'll see how that goes. But, the Jets can get up. It's just a question of how much do you want to double down on a lot of players on the roster. And I know we can look at the defense and say, okay, yeah, well, we should double down on these players. They're really good. Good today does not mean good tomorrow. And with the defense, and the Jets have had a good defense 2 years in a row now. But, usually that's more the exception than the rule. So, that's just something they have to ask themselves. And then the next thing they have to do is they got to have a very open discussion with Aaron Rodgers about really what he's thinking for next year. Now, I believe that he wants to play football. I don't think that he wants to go out like this. But, you have to make certain that he wants to play, and you have to make certain that he wants to play for your team. You can't... The path that the Jets take in the offseason is going to vary greatly based on Rodgers being here or not. The coach's future and the general manager's future might be tied to Rodgers being here. The way things are looking, the Jets have a chance for top 5 pick. And you've got to take a quarterback. I don't care if Rodgers is here or not. But you have to make certain that he's not going to pout if you take a quarterback. He's 40 years old coming off an Achilles tear. If you have a chance to take a quarterback, you have to take him. I don't know if Joe Douglas should be the guy making that kind of pick. He botched it once and hasn't really done much anything when it came to the offense. But, Rodgers plays a pivotal role. And, Rodgers is here. You're going to go out and you're going to trade for Devontae Adams. I mean, I think that's a given. You're going to bring a player like that in. Probably bringing in David Bakhtiari. You're probably going to talk about Randall Cobb having a much better potential next year than he had this year, and he'll probably be back. You'll hope you'll get more out of Lazard with Rodgers back. And, you're going to have guys around the league that you're bringing into play with Aaron Rodgers. If Rodgers is gone, then it becomes much more so a discussion about, where do we go as an organization? If you have a top 5 pick and Rodgers doesn't really want to play here anymore, well, now you probably need to make that decision of new coach, new general manager, and you're just starting over. You're just like, okay, you try to work through all the mistakes that have been made. You get rid of everybody that's on the coaching staff on the offensive side. Defensive side, I mean, you can interview your defensive coaches to promote them, to a head coaching position. I would think you'd probably want a clean start, but, they've done a good job. So, I mean, I think you could have that discussion at least. But for the other stuff, I mean, those guys are out. I mean, I don't see how, if Rodgers doesn't come back, I don't see how in the world you retain the people that have just done nothing when it's come to building a better overall team. And again, I don't want to hear about how great the defense is if the team still is nothing more than a 4 or 5, 6-win team. If you were a 5-win team with Sam Darnold and Adam Gase, or however many they won, I think it was 7 one year and 4 the next. Everybody quit in the next year. Whatever the number was. But, what's the difference? Just because there's a couple of players that are playing better, and you want to look at it, and, the defensive performance in a lot of these games gives you a, false sense of hope. There's just no... There's no light at the end of the tunnel if that's what you're doing. And if you want to say, well, if they had been able to draft Trevor Lawrence, maybe things would be different. That might be the case, but they didn't get a chance to draft Trevor Lawrence. And, if that's the thing, like, how much credit do you give the general manager at that point? If we're crediting a general manager with drafting Trevor Lawrence, finishing bad enough to get the number 1 overall pick, or, having a quarterback that you didn't, you did a good job in attempting to negotiate whatever kind of trade package that there was for Aaron Rodgers when you had zero leverage, really, because of the way the trade went down. They're very minimal leverage because of that. But it's not like you went out there and sealed this deal. This was more Aaron Rodgers, like, I don't want to play with Green Bay anymore. Jets have said they want me. I'll go play in New York. Like, that's what that was about. That wasn't about the masterful, building of a team. It's not, and I know in hindsight, this is probably a so-so kind of thing because of maybe where the team is now, though they're competing for the playoffs. The Rams, this is not, the Rams going out there and being very aggressive in a trade package to bring in a Matthew Stafford, who ends up, winning a Super Bowl, with them. It's not that. It's a different scenario, I think, than that type of, that type of team building. But they're going to have to have some really tough decisions here in the offseason. And it stinks to be a Jets fan right now. It really does. Hopefully they can pull out a win against Atlanta. They desperately need it. I don't know if they'll be able to. That team is pretty challenged as well. But I can't expect the Jets offense to do anything. So unless Atlanta makes like 4 really bad errors and the Jets defense somehow turns those into 14 points, it's still just going to be tough, for the Jets. So anyway, I just wanted to talk about them a little bit, and I don't know, see whatever happens for the rest of the season. Maybe get a miracle finish, and maybe they'll find a way to sneak in. But I guess we'll see. So next, let's talk about Von Miller for a minute here. Yeah, so there was a arrest warrant, I guess, that was issued for Miller in Dallas. And I haven't really followed up much on it, but I know I got a lot of questions about it. Very quietly, I mean, this has been... when the Bills made this signing, it was just like, this is not a good signing. And it's just gotten worse and worse and worse, I think, for them. But, this does kind of present a unique thing, because you have a situation here where Von Miller has $10.7 million already guaranteed next year. If you're following along, you can see it on his chart here. He's got 10.7. Basically, this entire salary is guaranteed for injury. It's about a $17 million salary. That number will become fully guaranteed. $10 million is fully guaranteed right now. 10.7. Fifth day of the league year. Basically, the balance, $6.435 million, is also guaranteed. Now, he runs a risk of having those guarantees void, which can give the Bills an out in the contract. It's still rough, on their salary cap. It'd be a $22 million, dead money hit, 21.791. So really barely even saves them anything. Only saves them $2 million on the cap if that was to happen. But long term, obviously that's a lot better for them. And this has not been a great signing by any stretch of the imagination. But the way that his contract works, and this is the way a lot of player contracts work, there's a number of things that can void the guarantees. So the two things that would come into play here, I guess three if you want to get into conduct detrimental, you're looking at conduct detrimental to the team. You're looking at a league suspension under the the conduct policy. And then the other one that's a possibility is if he does actually go to jail, and that causes him to miss time, that can void those guarantees as well. Now, none of that, to my knowledge, has happened. He certainly hasn't been suspended. So, the conduct detrimental and the NFL suspensions haven't come up at all. And I would imagine that he's, set to play, or at least he's not. If he's not playing this week, if it's been announced that he's not playing, and I just haven't seen it, that's not him missing a game. Now some people said, well, why can't the Bills just release him? Like, this is, obviously it's terrible what he's being accused of. Why didn't the Bills just release him, outright? And right now they don't have the cap room to do it. The Bills have, in 2023, Bills right now have about $1.5 million in cap space. Give it a plus or minus $500,000, so somewhere between $1 and $2 million in cap room. If they were to cut Von Miller, this $10.71 million that's guaranteed would accelerate onto the 2023 cap. They wouldn't be able to process that transaction because it would put them over the salary cap. So they can't cut him until something happens. Now, the league with these kind of things is typically pretty slow because you've got a whole legal process that, has to play out. So realistically, the only out that Buffalo would have this year, if they were looking for it, would be if he was arrested and his arrest led to him basically being put in jail, and because he was incarcerated, he missed practice or a game or whatever. At that point, the Bills have the ability to void the guarantee. So if that were to occur, those guarantees would probably void. The other stuff, would take time. A lot of it. And we see it all the time, how slow the league is with some of the stuff. And, maybe something could happen sooner rather than later, on that front. But, really the timing of it at that point really doesn't matter for the NFL or for the Bills from the NFL, because even if he hits the vesting date, it's not like it matters if he gets suspended after the vesting date. That still voids the guarantee, and so you would get out of the deal the next year. It's more just about being able to release him this year if whatever investigation they do pretty much proves out that he is guilty, or likely guilty, and you want to get rid of him. But without that, I don't think they have the ability, because they've gone so all in on this season. I'm just pulling up their cap page here. I'm just seeing if they have any players, that have base salaries that would be high enough to create $10 million in cap room. Because what they can always do is, if you can create the cap space, you can cut them, withhold the money, and let everything go into a grievance process. That the league would allow. But I don't think the league would allow the Bills to just say, we void your guarantees. That avoids the cap issue that comes with the release. And if he files a grievance, he files a grievance. But the grievance would even put them over, because the grievance would be, I think, $4 million on the cap. I think they count 40% of the grievance on the cap. I think it's how that typically works. But, they could probably create that much cap room. Morse has a $6 million salary. Deion Dawkins has a 3.6. Micah Hyde has a 5.3. But you've only got a couple of weeks to where they probably couldn't even create to get up to that much cap room. So I don't think there's a way they can actually do it, unless something was absolutely firm that those guarantees next year were void. So I thought that was one to bring up. Zach Ertz would be the other one. I didn't really understand this whole thing, and I already moved him off the roster, so I'm only going to have a contract history up here. If I pull it up. Zach Ertz. So Zach Ertz, this was this is one of those where you trade for a player, and because of that, you go and you re-sign him when there probably wasn't a reason for them to do that. At least not to the level of contract I think that they did. Ertz's career was not the Kelsey career. It was not the the end of year, end of career kind of stuff. That you saw with Kelsey, and I'm just pulling up his yardage totals here. Are these numbers right? He only had 189 yards in 2021. Maybe something's wrong with our numbers here. Let's see, Zach Ertz. I know this year he didn't have much. I'm just going to Pro Football Reference. Yeah, we had something that's wrong there. So it was 189 yards with Philadelphia, 763 total. But 406 and 187 is what was the last 2 years in Arizona. I mean, they've gotten no production out of him. Very limited production over the 2 years that he's been there. But it was a weird thing. So, he had $8.5 million of his salary was guaranteed. He had an $8.75 million base. Had they cut him, he could file a claim for termination pay, for an extra $250,000. I doubt he would do that. But they went through this whole wonky process, which is basically, we're going to, what did they say they would do? If as long as he was willing to forego one game check, they'd give him his release. And I didn't get the whole purpose of it. I didn't really understand. It seems like a lot to do for really no reason. Maybe they save a couple $100,000 at the end of the day. But that's really about it. And, technically he's still eligible for termination pay, but I know there also was a settlement that they did. So, they may have done something where, excuse me, he's no longer eligible for termination pay. he may have waived that right in whatever kind of settlement they came up with, so he could try to land with another football team. But it was just kind of an odd situation, I thought there. I thought that was kind of a weird one. So ultimately for those 2 years, the Cardinals will have paid him, let's see, about 10-7 last year. Let's see, how much did he earn this year? This year you had to earn around 8. I mean, it's a lot that they ended up paying him. Yeah, 10 million in cash this year, 10 million last year, 10.6. So, 20.6 million for 700 yards over 2 years. They're going to chalk that one up as a bad signing too. Now he'll go and sign with someone, and again, maybe he did, but it'll be the minimum 1.165 million, prorated for the rest of the year. So about 320,000, 350, something like that, is all you need in cap room. So pretty much anybody that wants him can sign him. But I think right now he's more of a name than anything else. Now that can lead to something, right? Jimmy Graham is still in the league. So, having a name means you can keep playing if you want to play. Maybe Philadelphia would be the team if they haven't signed him already, just because, he's, that's where his career was made. And maybe he could slot in there and do something effective for them. Possibly. All right. So I think, I don't know, you know what? We can talk about the Panthers for a minute. I talked about the Jets and their ineptness. The Panthers make the Jets look like, great organization here. I fired Frank Reich for the remainder of the season. I don't really get it unless he basically said, just fire me. Like, I don't understand why you wouldn't let him, go the rest of the year. Like, it's not as if another couple of weeks is going to destroy your quarterback who's looked terrible. He was a rookie. It happens. But it's not like a couple of weeks is going to destroy him. And, you just get the feeling that the owner didn't want to make this hire, made it, probably because I think it was the Lions coordinator that he wanted pulled out. So I guess he was maybe convinced that Reich was the guy. And when you look at the success C.J. Stroud is having in Houston, the lack of success that his guy is having, you just kind of are like, whatever. Did go out of his way to say that he believes in the quarterback, and so does everybody else in that organization. Wants to make sure that it's known that it was a team decision, not just his decision to, draft him. And basically just threw all the guys on offense under the bus, in Carolina. That it was the head coach that failed, the offensive coordinator, and the quarterback's coach, basically. That were all kind of failures in the development of his player. They have gone through head coaches at a rate that might even make the Cleveland Browns blush. That's how they've kind of churned through a couple of guys here. And right now, they just need some kind of direction with what they're doing. And I don't know if the owner needs somebody to just kind of say, look, just give me a shot, put me in charge. You've got to take a step back from this. There's a process involved here, because you're going to get to a point where you become such a bad opening that it becomes difficult then to attract certain candidates, to your job. And I know that's hard to say, in the NFL, there's so few job openings that you should, if you get an offer, you should be taking it. But, sometimes people are worried that, and there's truth to that too. You only get one opportunity a lot of times. So if you only get one opportunity, you may not want it to be with an organization that's just the Panthers right now. There's some good people that work in that building. But, it's hard if you don't have direction from an owner, or, the owner can pull the plug, on whatever direction might exist. It becomes difficult at that point to, build anything sustainable. So I feel for people right now that are Panthers fans, because whatever they're doing right now, it really just, I think it just has to make people, very uneasy about, the future in Carolina. And that's another team right now that just needs a win. You just need a win to, I think, make the owner happy, and, probably kind of get him maybe out of some of what seems like the, day-to-day, for the team. But, that's a rough one going on right now. All right, let me take a look for some questions here, and then we'll wrap this up. Let's see. I can go to email here. All right, so this is going, I'm just doing a search through my email. This is from Cameron. I may have done this already. Why don't all players negotiate a percentage of their guarantees to be paid out as a roster bonus owed every year in March? A lot of people try to do it. A lot of times it ends up being something that is a very team-driven decision. Now, if you are a real high-level player, you might have a little bit more leverage to be able to do that. But a lot of times it's up to the teams. And, I think what happens many times, actually, just thinking about it right here off the top of my head, the early season roster bonus is often used by teams that don't guarantee the salaries. The Cincinnati Bengals, the Pittsburgh Steelers, Green Bay Packers. It's almost like, okay, well, we're not going to guarantee you a penny. Let's say you signed a contract in 2023. We're not going to guarantee you a penny in 2024. But we'll pay $15 million of your $18 million salary in March. If you're on the roster, if we still have you on the roster on March 5th, we'll give you 80% of your salary for the year. You'll have earned it on that day. Now, it doesn't mean it's getting all paid out, but, in a sense, it's like works very similar to a vesting guarantee. Even though there's no injury protection tied to it, it works just the same as anything else. On the other hand, if you're willing to guarantee a player his salary for the year, the team often kind of, hits back when you say, okay, well, if we've got, $18 million guaranteed next year, and I want $15 million of that as a roster bonus, with half of it paid out in March, a quarter of it paid out in June, and the rest paid out over 18 weeks, the hit back from the team on that is, well, we're guaranteeing his salary. So it's already guaranteed. If you want it guaranteed, we'll pay it out as salary. We're not going to do a roster bonus with actual payments that come out in March or whatever. You want to do that? Well, then let's change the guarantee that's in the contract. So I think that's kind of what comes into play when you get into those decisions. And, you have to decide what's better. And that's why for a lot of those players, that don't get those roster bonuses in there, you'll often see those roster bonuses in the last year of the contract, acting as a decision point for the team. And the teams are willing to do that. Why? Well, because there is no guarantee in those years. Let's see what else I have here from email. Sorry if I missed anything, but if it didn't say podcast in it, I'm not pulling it up. Colby, with Watson out for the season, would this be a great opportunity for what you mentioned last podcast about Jimmy Garoppolo? Raiders cut him. Browns pick up the contract. Raiders aren't on the hook for the $10 million guaranteed next year. Do you think that's likely? So, obviously this was sent a couple of weeks ago. I think before last time I did a podcast. And obviously it didn't happen. It was probably worth a shot. Unless they know that the front office in Cleveland is just really negative on Garoppolo, that probably would have been worth a shot. Like, I don't really understand why the Raiders have not been trying to unload that contract. And you can make those cap numbers work, or at least they could have with a couple of restructures. I don't really understand why, that hasn't been an avenue that they've explored. When you see Zach Ertz and Derek Barnett and, some of these teams basically getting rid of dead weight like that, let Jimmy Garoppolo be your dead weight that you get rid of. I don't really understand it, but that's the Raiders for you. All right, let's see here. Let's see. It looks like one more. This is from Jason. Vikings signed Marcus Davenport and gave him a per game bonus for $2 million. Local reports said that this is guaranteed, even if IR exception for an injury to the right shoulder. He's on IR for an ankle. Right. So if you have a injury, it's the same as, remember what we talked about with Garoppolo months ago, and when Florio started having his little crazy spat about the contract language in Garoppolo's contract, which we talked about months before that. Basically it's a pre-existing condition, and it's one of those that we're willing to pay you your per game bonus for any injury, just not this one. Like we need a percentage of your contract tied to a pre-existing condition that we don't want to pay for. Does calling this a per game bonus allow the Vikings to get a cap credit in 2024 for the games missed in 23? He's missed 9 already. So it should, if they all counted on the cap this year. Did it? Let me pull them up. Marcus Davenport. Let's see. Yeah, it looks like this all counted on the cap this year. So yeah, so for the games, the games missed, if he actually missed them for a reason why that per game bonus was not paid out, you would get that. But if it's tied to a specific injury, you're not going to get a credit for it because he's getting paid. Which is the second part, which you've mentioned here. If no credit, then this is purely a workaround for giving a team salary relief if an injury happens to a body part they have questions about. Right. So, basically it's acting in a very similar way, as that. Let's see. The reason I'm wondering this is Hunter projects to earn $3 million in sack incentives that will be charged 24. He along with Cousins have dead money set to hit the cap, if not in full. $1.5 million credit for Davenport would help lessen that burden. So, they're going to be in some issues with some of that stuff there, but I don't know the particulars on the Davenport one, but I would imagine if the beat reporters all have that means they got to look at the contract, for what that is. So if his IR is completely unrelated to that injury, and that's the condition of the per game bonus, it means he's going to be paid that per game bonus, so you're not going to get a cap credit for it. But if he was, injured for that, or if it was just a regular per game bonus, and he was on IR, you would get a credit for that next year for those games missed. All right, let's go to Twitter here. mentioned Zach Prescott. All right, let's see here. A couple questions. All right, Justin, a question I should have asked in April, but why did the Ravens extend Lamar when no one else was interested? His cap hit is a true 52 instead of the 45.5 if he signed in 2022. Just seems like a bad deal for the Ravens as the years go on when nobody else was interested. So I don't think they knew. I think when you go back, to the whole Lamar Jackson, Baltimore Ravens situation, I don't think that Baltimore knew, at least I don't think they did, as to what the interest level was around the league. But, you also, you're looking for a long-term solution. And the fact of the matter is, if you don't offer him $52 million a year, he's not going to sign. You will get the short-term benefit of, having the player, with a lower number, whatever Jackson's tag would have been, 32 this year and, 38, 40 or whatever the following year. You would have that, but you'd have an unhappy player. You don't want an unhappy quarterback because they're just too important to the success of the team. And you basically run into this lame duck issue where come the third year, you're probably not going to be able to keep him and he's going to end up with another team. So I really think the question for the Ravens is, why did the Ravens not extend him before the market jumped up? Like, there were certain things, obviously, that Lamar Jackson was looking for. And those things change as other contracts get signed. And they were in a position where they probably could have extended him when the market was in the 40s to where they could have done that. So I think they probably dragged their feet too long on it. And that's why the numbers got to where they ended up getting to. And I think they did not do a good job of assessing where the market was headed before they got down this whole franchise tag path with everything else. Colin, regarding the Fitzgerald-Spielberger draft value chart, what do you think is the most misunderstood part by novices, industry professionals? So I think the thing that's most misunderstood about it, and I don't even know if misunderstood is the right way to put it. I think it's more just the chart is really meant to be dynamic. And I think, and we don't even use it that way. Like when we talk about trades, talk about blind trades and doing that stuff. Sometimes, when the picks are made, typically on a trade up when a pick is made, I get into, the draft value numbers, to where you take those numbers, all right, and those numbers correspond to a percentage or whatever. And if you draft a quarterback, you'd say, okay, the number 5 pick in the draft, whatever point value that it is. Now, off the top of my head, I have no idea what our number is on that. I'm too lazy to look it up. That can translate to a percentage, and that percentage is the percentage of the top 5 values right now. So you would say that that player is probably worth, if he's a quarterback, probably be the equivalent of a player who's $40 million. Would be your expectation, which would be it'd be Daniel Jones. Not a good thing, but that's just the nature of where the quarterbacks are. But let's say where Daniel Jones was playing last year, where you looked at him and you said, okay, there's promise there or whatever. So I think that's one of the things that's missed with it, is that you can use it from a dynamic standpoint to say, if we are trading up into this particular position, like, what's our expected return? Because it might be more than what that number is, or it might be a lot less than what the number is if you're trading up for like a linebacker or something. So I think that's more something. It's probably not misunderstood. I think it's just missed. And then I think the other thing that's misunderstood, again, if you even want to call it that, I think when you get into, methodologies of it, I think people miss the fact that this was just based on raw numbers. That it's just strictly based on past results. Now, it's from a sample period of the draft, and if Brad and I ever get the time to update it, we can obviously expand it out much further and take a look at it. But we took ourselves out of the equation when we came up with doing it this way. This is not Jason and Brad are evaluating draft picks. This is not anything related to that. This is us saying, okay, I am letting the NFL evaluate the draft pick. Like, if somebody wants to tell me that Leonard Williams is worth $21 million a year or whatever the Giants paid him, fine. That tells me that pick number 5 or pick number 6, whatever he was that year with the Jets, he's worth, that pick that particular year was worth at the time, probably 115% of the top 5 players on the interior defensive line, right? He was probably the number 2 paid player at that position. Aaron Donald would have been number 1. So if you take the average top 5, it was over that. So, that's what that tells me. And, I'm letting the NFL tell me. I am letting the experts in the NFL tell me that, pick number 20 in a given year was, only worth on a veteran scale $6 million at a position where top players make $25 million. I am letting the NFL tell me that, pick 200 happened in a given year to be worth, $2.3 million because he's a core special teams guy. I think that gets missed because people think that you create and you manufacture methods of player evaluation, and you get the things, stick to the numbers, nerd, all that silly stuff that comes out to you, and it's just like, well, what are we talking about? This is numbers, and that's probably not even something misunderstood. That's probably people that were just kind of ignorant of stuff, and they don't like when you criticize a trade up, for their favorite team. Again, that's getting into the fandom aspect I was talking about before, where you can't have a rational discussion about anything. But I think people do miss sometimes that it's strictly and solely based on past performance that is, it's somewhat subjective, right? Because teams are all going to have different opinions, on players, and obviously there's a bit of a bias when you extend your own players sometimes. But it's not like manufacturing some random statistics to fit a narrative that, you just want to be mean to this team. Like there's nothing remotely like that in there. Terrell, Dak has all the leverage. What numbers do you see for his next contract? Let me just pull up here. Joe Burrow's at 55. It's a weird one. The Burrow thing, a little bit different. But, probably somewhere in that... Dax is going to be different because Dallas is not going to go 5 years. I don't know if they'll go 4 or they'll go 3. I think he does have a lot of leverage. He's made a lot of money. I don't know if he'll get to 60, based on where the market is right now. Depends on what Jacksonville maybe does with Lawrence, in there. I would say, argument that I would probably look at here is if Burrow was 2.5 million a year over the next closest, I would probably look at that and say, okay, so Dak should be 3 over Burrow. Like that's a similar growth point. Would you get him to 58? But I'm sure the initial ask should be 60. Based on where the numbers are right now. And kind of go from there. But he'll be somewhere in that range. I mean, when the numbers get that high, I mean, we're really splitting hairs when it comes to that. Flip, seeing a lot of players demanding the release from contracts during the season they're being granted. Is this happening more this year compared to years past? Why are teams allowing it to happen with no monetary penalties? Well, certainly it's not widespread. This is happening more often, I would say, than in the past. I think when we look at a lot of these players, you get players that, and this runs both ways. You don't have loyalty from players anymore. You don't have loyalty from organizations. There's so much turnover now in the front of the leagues, front offices. There's a lot of turnover. Coaching staffs, there's a ton of turnover. And you understand that your windows of winning are pretty short. And sometimes, even though you kind of play for that contract, like Zach Ertz, I think would be a perfect example of this. Zach Ertz, I think, felt slighted by Philadelphia, that they were not going out of their way to probably make him the highest paid tight end in the NFL, or, somewhat close to it, on a contract that he thought he deserved. Because I think Philadelphia looked at him as probably a trending down player, and they said that, they have a younger guy that they're kind of bringing behind him, and they would move on. So, you get upset with your team, and you go to the grass is always greener, right? The other side, and you go and you find a team that's willing to pay you, which he found in Arizona, and things very quickly fall apart in Arizona, and you look at your old teammates still having a great time in Philadelphia that's being competitive, they're winning, and it's almost like, I just want to go back there, or I want to go back to something like that. And that's not what we have here. This isn't the coach that I came in for. This isn't the general manager I signed with. Like, just let me go. And I think that's a lot of what goes on both sides right now. I think that's a reason why the loyalty is less on the team end. You bring in a new GM, they have almost no attachment to the players that were already here. They just look to purge the roster many times. And, if you're getting towards the end of the year and a veteran player doesn't want to be there, you don't really even want to deal with the headache in the locker room. It's just like, you know what, if you want to go, go. It's let's just come to an agreement on this and, let's move on. But I do think that this is something that's happening more and more, in the league. And, I know a lot of people, that's the leverage the players have. Somewhat, but it's not to that level yet. Teams are obviously agreeing with these things. I think the question when it comes to people talking about the player empowerment is, when more really good players on a good football team start asking to go, and, you end up just, trying to band-aid the situation and making everybody happy. Carlos, how much is Ohtani signing for and for who? Sorry, wrong sport. Yep. PG-13. How much cap space are the Raiders projected to have in 2024 by cutting Jimmy? Carrying over this year's space and recovery of Chandler Jones's money, is there any injury clause in Jimmy's contract where he's only guaranteed part of his 24 contract? No. So on the second part, they took that injury protection out. I don't really know why, but they did. I believe his salary is now free and clear. So I think that guarantee is no longer. Sorry, I'm just checking something here. I think that guarantee is no longer a something that can be lost. I don't know how much of Chandler Jones they're going to recover. I don't think they'll recover anything. Get a guarantee. He's also got termination pay that would supersede the guarantee if the guarantee was void because he was on the Raiders' active roster for week 1. I don't know if the Raiders went through any kind of process through everything that went on there to say he wasn't eligible for that, because you do have to do that. You do actually have to go through a process of, telling the player that he's basically not performing up to the standards that you would expect, and because of that, this is a warning that he could risk losing his privileges for termination pay because of that. I don't know if they really went through that stuff. My guess is they did not. We'll see. But now, if they, let's see, the Raiders, how much they projected to have. All right, let's take a look here. Let me do the Raiders. Let's see. Whoops. There's a Raiders cap space. That's what I'm looking for, not the calculator. And my internet has decided it doesn't want to work. There we go. All right, so the Raiders. Now we have carryover in there. This is like a very estimated number. So they have about $66 million in cap room. That's top 10-ish in the league. That's not including full roster. But top 10 in the league is where they would be. Cutting Jimmy would open up nothing. So they'll still be top 10 in the league when if they just move on from him. There's really nothing there that they would pick up. The one that you would pick up something on is trading. No, even trading Devontae Adams doesn't really get you much. So the decisions that they're going to have next year on some of those players are probably not really going to impact their cap that much. It's more just going to be decisions about what they can and can't get in draft capital. Now long term, if that's what we're looking at, if they do promote, like in other words, if interim coach just becomes head coach, which they may do because they might feel like the last time they screwed up, that might not be so much planning on the long term because you probably know you're on a short leash. But if you do bring in somebody new, they probably look at that, and even though Garoppolo doesn't save them any money by cutting, someone will look at that in the long term and say, okay, yeah, it doesn't save us anything in 2024, but we'll be in a much better position in 2025 if we get rid of him in 2024. They would probably look at it and say, if we can get a second and a fourth for Devontae Adams, we're probably in a better position than paying him next year. A lot of the decisions they have are going to depend on what type of hire they make. Cindy, how easy is it for the Cardinals to trade Kyler Murray if they want to draft a quarterback? That's a good question. So I would guess, let's pull up Kyler Murray's page here. So, he's played okay since coming back. So, the first question is, how many teams are going to be interested? And, what are those costs going to be? So, the costs next year would be $37.85 million. The cost in 2025 would be about $30 million. The cost in 2026 would be, let's see, 22.39, about $40 million. I can just run on the cash due here. Yeah, $42 million in 2026, 36 in 27, 46 in 28. Those numbers are low enough to where I think teams would look at this and say, okay, kind of like Detroit right now with Jared Goff, right? That those salaries relative to what other quarterbacks make when you actually have to sign a player, to an extension at $55 million a year in new money. The Cardinals have already picked up a lot of that bill. So you're looking at a player that will cost you $38.8, $32.6, $42.5 over the next 3 years. That's pretty workable. When you can manipulate the numbers however you want on the salary cap, that's pretty workable. Now, he does have these rolling guarantees to where, you start running these risks where, in 26 is 27 salary is guaranteed. So, that's the one risk that exists with that contract is that, you're making a commitment that is probably a 4-year commitment, to him. But, as long as you believe he can stay healthy and that he's committed to, football versus Call of Duty or Fortnite or whatever games they were thinking he was playing, this is a very reasonable contract to bring on. But you just have to ask yourself, do you want him for 4 years? Because that's probably what it is. That's the same question. This was a very little discussion that I saw on Twitter this week. We were discussing Russell Wilson a little bit, and it's like, the Broncos right now are finding ways to win football games more in spite of their offense than anything else. Like, it's amazing that they're winning some of these games. And it's like, okay, well, they're winning. They might make the playoffs. Obviously that means Russell Wilson is, safe for next year. And it's like, you got to look at this from the perspective of the coach is basically coaching in many ways, I think, around the quarterback. But even if he's not, I think we can all agree that Russell Wilson is not really a top-tier quarterback anymore. And I'm not saying he's being paid like a top-tier quarterback either, but you're opting into 2 years of him. If you say he's my quarterback next year, it means he's also your quarterback in 2025 because that's the nature of his contract. His contract is, if I'm on the roster in March of 24, well, now my salary is guaranteed in 2025. So you might look at this and say, this is not sustainable for us. Like, we can't lock ourselves into 2 years of Russell Wilson. Like, we need a different option. Now, the other side of the coin is you have to determine what that option is, because you don't want to be like the Raiders who say, okay, well, we don't want Derek Carr anymore. I made a mistake extending him. I really don't like him. Talking about the coach. And what we're going to do is we're going to opt into another quarterback where we kind of lock ourselves into 2 years of that quarterback, and it's just a lateral move. That doesn't do you any good. So it's like, if I'm going to cut Russell Wilson and, just go out there and sign Jimmy Garoppolo, it's like, okay, what's the point? Then you can get into that discussion. But, in terms of someone like a Kyler Murray, it's the same kind of thing. It's, do you want to commit to, essentially 4 years based on the guarantee structure? So his 24 salary is already guaranteed. 25 salary becomes guaranteed in 24. 26 salary becomes guaranteed in 25, and 27 salary becomes guaranteed in 26. So, that's the kind of question that you have to ask yourself if you're interested in trading for him. So you have to be pretty confident that, he's your guy for 4 years. That might work, for you when discussing a trade, because you can bring up the point that, we're making a 4-year commitment to this guy. We're not going to overpay you because we're saving you the burden. You don't want him. And right now, the way his contract is structured, you're stuck with him for 4 years. And we already know you don't want him. So, I think that can actually help a little bit in negotiating a trade package. But, you have to be very confident that this is your guy. Black Gold, do you think CD has a chance to out-earn Jefferson over the next few years with the tag this year that he leverages to a better deal? He's not as good of a player as Justin Jefferson. The only way that he would have a chance to out-earn him would be if Jefferson signed first and he was able to use that in a negotiation with Dallas. I think that would be difficult. I'm not sure that would be the easiest thing to do. I almost feel like Jefferson is going to create a cap on the market versus like a new starting point. This is different than Nick Bosa, where I think Nick Bosa is a starting point. I think Jefferson is a end point. So I can't say there's no chance, but I would say it's a pretty small chance that happens. Jake, for the big name quarterbacks who got hurt, do any teams have insurance? If they do, how does it affect their cap? Is there a way to know which teams have insurance before the quarterbacks get hurt or not? I don't really know. I usually find out after the fact. Plenty of teams take out insurance on the players. Basically, to get a salary cap credit, you actually have to put in the contract itself the fact that you have an insurance policy, what the amounts are that are insured for each of those years, and I think you have to make a copy of the policy available to the Players Association. I think that's the rules with it. There's a possibility, a lot of contracts will just have a blanket statement that, team has insurable interest in the player, which they might have. Like I know the Jets, for example, have a clause in Aaron Rodgers' contract that says they have an insurable interest in the player. However, to the best of my knowledge, they never actually got one. And if they did, it's not the type that you would get a salary cap credit for because it's not listed in his contract. So any proceeds they would get, that would help the Jets' bottom line in terms of paying stuff out, but it would not help them with the salary cap. The NFL wouldn't look at that as something that causes a reimbursement. Sometimes when the insurance policies are kind of unique, like Colin Kaepernick's, for example, where they made him pay the premiums, or where it's just kind of a specific player, where it comes up and kind of like the way Jimmy Garoppolo with the injury stuff happened. Those kind of things usually leak out, when that happens, but I feel like that's pretty rare. Now, when teams do have the type of insurance that impacts the salary cap, basically it impacts in two ways. So one is the player's individual cap hit, and the other one is the adjusted cap number for a team. So what the NFL does is they will go in there and they'll take the proceeds that come. Let's say I have a signing bonus that has insurance on it. And typically you would insure like the proration for the year or some percentage of it or something like that. So let's say a player got a $20 million signing bonus. All right. And, he has $4 million insured for this year because that's his, proration on the year. Let's just say that's the way that it worked out. And he missed the whole season. Team gets back $4 million in insurance. The NFL will go in there and they'll revalue the signing bonus. So, they'll take that signing bonus and they'll take $4 million out of it. And they'll say the proration from the contract, instead of $4 million, per year, should be, what would it be? Closer to 3 at that point. A little bit more than that, probably like 3.5 or something along those lines. They would take that down. So basically, instead of 20 divided by 5, you'd have 16 divided by 5. And that's the way that would work. So his proration would go to that, and then you would get a credit, for this particular year, whatever the proration is that would have gone to that year. So let's say 4 million, prorated over the 750. What you would do with that is the team would get an adjustment on their salary cap the next year. That would be the $750,000, and that would be the amount of money that counted on your salary cap in the proration for 2023. That's the portion of it that should have been refunded in 2023. So you would see it in the adjustment, and you would see it in that. Now, if a team just has paragraph 5 salary insured, then you would only see that in the adjustment. That doesn't impact the numbers. It's the signing bonus, option bonus kind of stuff that impacts the cap numbers for the players. The other ones are the adjusted cap. So a lot of times when the numbers come out on what's a team's adjusted cap, right? The adjusted cap is made up of two things. It's made up of carryover that we know. We can look at OTC and we can get a pretty good idea as what the carryover was from the prior year. And, adjustments that come from like incentives and just other kinds of stuff. When you see a team that has like a big number in adjustments, in the positive direction for the team, it might mean that they had a player that got hurt that they had insured, and that showed up on that. I think a couple of years ago, Detroit, they probably had insurance on who's the guy they signed from the Patriots. Name escapes me right now. He was just hurt a lot. They had insurance on a player like that. And, that gets you money. And cap relief. All right, shoes. Looking back at it, would it have been better for the Panthers to include Brian Burns and keep DJ Moore to help the quarterback development, or should it not matter? So there was no reason for the Panthers to keep Burns. When the Rams made that stupid offer, I don't know how the Panthers said no. Like, that doesn't make any sense. This is where you fall into the... Now, here I'm going to criticize Carolina. This is where you fall into the trap where you go into this thing like, oh, well, if it's a pick in the future, you got to discount that by a round. And, why? Why discount all of that by a round? Look at where you are right now. What would you rather have? If you didn't get the pick in 2023 and you only got it in wouldn't you rather have that first round pick in 2024, seeing how much you suck this year? Would you look at that? Let's say the Rams pick is 15, if that's what it would have been in 2024. Would you look at that in 2024 and go, well, yeah, that's really like having the 45th pick in the draft? Yeah, I'm picking 15, but really it's a 45. Like, no! Don't do it that way. That's like a big miss by a lot of front offices in the NFL. Is that devaluation of the draft pick, by like a round or multiple rounds if it's in the future. In the NBA, teams look at that stuff as gold because even though it's far in the future, it's still a great pick. It's still a great pick to have. It's better than, having that. So, that was, that was just terrible from them. I don't think keeping DJ Moore would have helped their quarterback develop anymore. You obviously would have had a benefit of having a better quarterback, situation. A better receiver room. But I don't think it helps that much. I think it usually works the other way around. My opinion from watching football is that, the great quarterback can kind of make a mediocre receiver look really good. the great quarterback with the great receiver everybody gets a special season when that happens. The great quarterback probably can't lift up a bad receiver. They can lift them up a little bit to where, maybe Mahomes playing with like a Mecole Hardman can make Hardman look not like a total bust. But probably is never, and you could see they don't give playing time to a lot of their guys in Kansas City because of that. They're just a lot of inconsistencies and stuff. It's just like a cycle that they try to run through there. I think that's what happens. I think you can usually see when wide receivers more or less have talent, even though the quarterback is suspect. Like what would a Jefferson look like with Zach Wilson? So Jefferson's not going to put up the numbers that he does if he's playing with somebody like Zach Wilson. But you would also see Jefferson getting open down the field and probably making some big plays. And you would see him on some awful throws, making plays on the football. Very similar to, Garrett Wilson. Where, you can see from some of the ways that he bails out Zach Wilson, even though I got on him a little bit before about, some drops and stuff here and there, you see that skill, just based on the way that they're able to, manufacture catches with the subpar quarterback. So, I think that's kind of the stuff that happens. But I think wide receivers rarely make a quarterback. Wide receivers can be productive, even with a subpar quarterback play, like DeAndre Hopkins. You look at his career. But I don't think that you can kind of get to that. You don't get to the next level as a wide receiver for the most part. And they're certainly not going to lift the quarterback up. There's too many things that you need in today's NFL. You can't just have one great receiver and expect that guy to carry a football team. Like, it's just not going to happen. Jason, for Dak's next contract, he has leverage. Do you think he goes for a 3 or 4 year contract, both with void years? I think that's really going to be up to Dallas. I'm sure he wants a 3 at this age. Kind of doesn't really make too much of a difference. He signs a 3 year deal, probably can get extended. 4 year deal, probably can still get extended, depending on the way that you structure that contract. I think it's going to be up to Dallas, but I think I'd opt for the 3 year if that might help me with cash flows and maybe some of the ways to keep maybe some of the guarantees down a little bit. I think I would do that. Hamburglar, how bad do you see Rodgers' contract being for the next 3 years for the Jets? I don't think that'll really be much of an issue. When it's time for Rodgers to leave, I think he'll restructure the deal to let the Jets spread that cap hit out over 2 years. So I don't think that's going to be an issue. I think the only way that there would be a issue would be if the Jets made the decision they wanted to move on from him next year and he said no. But I don't see that scenario playing out at all. So I think that it'll be fine. What a fun guy. Whose contract will the Cowboys want to use to base Parsons' contract on? What does agents want to use? I think, Parsons so good. I mean, everybody's just going to agree that Nick Bosa is what you build off of. It's just a question of how far do you build off of Nick Bosa. Like Dallas coming in there, I'm just pulling up the edges here. Dallas coming in there and bringing up like Joey Bosa, like makes no sense. Or TJ Watt. It's like the number is 34. I think the issue that you come up with here, and, I'm sure, again, what you look at, because the numbers are different, I think you could probably make a case, which is not going to go anywhere, but you would say that Bosa is a $6 million raise per year over Watt. So, therefore, Parsons should be worth $40 million a year. The counter on that is that Aaron Donald is already at 32. So, really, this is more of a $2 million raise. So, we're willing to go to 36. And I am sure that somewhere in there you'll hear some ridiculous posturing of Daniel Jones is $40 million a year. Parsons is a hell of a lot more valuable than Daniel Jones. Therefore, he's worth more money. And, you'll say, well, he's not worth as much as Josh Allen, so we'll say 42.5. This always happens, with players, Odell Beckham, Michael Thomas, it's like, we should be paid like quarterbacks. And you get that with defensive players here and there too. Where the quarterback, the defense were as valuable as a quarterback. That probably isn't going to go anywhere, but it might be a point. The only thing is, just from seeing the little bits and pieces of things that Parsons posts on Twitter, I don't, for some reason, I don't see it being very contentious. I think that this is just going to be a deal that kind of comes together as long as everybody is on the same page with, at least a reasonable range of outcomes when it comes to the salary. Terrell, projected Kirk Cousins contract for me, 1 year, 30 guaranteed with Atlanta with no tag in 25. So Cousins already kind of has a de facto no tag because he was tagged 2 times by Washington. The clause really for him is mainly no transition tag. His is going to be real interesting coming off injury. You could get something like that. Cousins should be aiming for 40, but off that injury, who knows? You can build up a contract with a lot of incentives, based on performance. And Cousins has had so much money guaranteed to him through the years, and we saw him take less this year. He could have exerted a lot of leverage on Minnesota and did not. So, maybe that's a possibility, doing something like that, because it's just going to add to the guaranteed total, which is kind of like it adds to the legend of Kirk Cousins. So maybe something like that would happen. Jason Stark, if Joe Douglas isn't fired, do you think he trades a first for Devontae Adams, spends on David Bakhtiari, and wrecks the team for the near future? So, I'm pretty sure Joe Douglas is going to be back if Aaron Rodgers is back. If that's the case, they'll make moves for these players. I think Bakhtiari will get a contract that's very similar to the one that he gave Dwayne Brown, which was a bad deal. Probably a little bit more than that. Bakhtiari's always hurt, so I'm not a big fan of doing something like that, but I think that's a possibility. I don't think he would trade a first for Devontae Adams. I think he would probably trade a number 2 for Adams. Now, obviously, Jets aren't going to have a number 2 next year because that's going to go for Rodgers, so it might be a future number 2. Maybe you could put a condition on there about it jumping somehow to a 1. But I do not think he will give up a first-round pick for Devontae Adams. But I do think they would bring him in. But, if we talk about devaluing picks, maybe give one in the future. But I don't think so. I think it'd end up being a 2 at some point. Brian, welcome back. Can you project Jeremy Chinn's contract and what position he might want to play if he leaves Carolina? Well, I'm pretty sure he's going to play safety. He's been banged up the last 2 years, right? He missed a lot of games this year. Missed 7 games last year, 8 games, something like that. I think, right? I would guess, you're comparable would be someone like a Marcus May. What did May sign for with New Orleans? 7.5. I feel like that's where you would be. Justin Reed's at 10.5. I mean, that's reasonable number 2. Just off the top of my head, you're coming off of some injuries and, stuff like that. Safety is there's a lot of safeties available. And it's a hard position to project because there are good players who probably hold out for too much money And because there's so many available players, teams quickly move on. And I think that's kind of the mistake that happens when, as you drop down, if you can see the list that I have here, you drop down in some of these numbers where you get into the $4 million range, and you look at some of the player names, and you're like, oh, that guy's a pretty good player. And it's like, yeah, they're pretty good players. The problem is, instead of valuing themselves at $5 million, like a Xavier Woods, $5 million or something like that, maybe they could have gotten to 7, but when they got a $7 million offer, they were probably valuing themselves at 10. And they were like, well, no, I don't want to play unless you sign me for $10 million. And then, a team comes around and they find another player that they like and they sign him for 8.75, or they sign him for 7.5, and now your market's shot. So I think that happens a lot at that position. And so I think that that makes it very difficult sometimes to project numbers for the players, because I think it's not that hard to come up with a range that the player is reasonable at. But if he tries to play hardball, or tries to, take his time trying to negotiate this deal, thinking he's going to get more and more and more, I think because of the nature of that position, it's very easy for a team to turn around and go, screw it. Let's just go to somebody else where it's just easier to get a deal done. That's very different than, say, a pass rusher, where there's maybe one pass rusher available a year. When that's the situation, it's like, well, we really want this guy. If he's going to drag his feet, let's keep engaging, because there's no other options. That's why the Bears traded what they did for Sweat. I'm sure they looked at that and they said, well, there's no options in free agency. So, whatever we're going to do with him, that's what we're going to do. All right, a couple more questions and we'll call it a night here. So we have really labored through these Michelob Ultras here. All right, let's see. Let me just go to the bottom of this. B1 Joe. What NFL quarterback would do best in the Dr. Pepper tuition challenge? Who would be worse? I haven't watched a second of that, so I have nothing I can say about that thing. Zach, how much money, if any, did Cousins lose when his Achilles snapped? Probably a lot. You may have gone from a surefire 3-year deal, 2 years of it guaranteed, to maybe doing a 1-year contract. Or maybe a very incentivized deal. Maybe that's a 2 or 3 year deal, but very incentivized. Maybe something that runs similar to that Garoppolo deal, where you've got a lot of conditionals on, injury based on that Achilles. So I think it's really unfortunate, and it's terrible, when that happens. Jake, what's worse for a team, drafting a terrible quarterback, Zach Wilson, or passing on a generational quarterback for an average outcome, passing on a Mahomes for a lineman or something like that? So, from a process standpoint, the latter is far worse. Passing on the generational quarterback for an average outcome is far worse. All right? Swinging for Zach Wilson and missing is what it is. However, here's the issue. When you draft a quarterback like Zach Wilson, 90% of the time you double down on Zach Wilson. Meaning, even though the money is not very big in the contracts anymore, Zach Wilson is quarterback 1 in year 1, he's quarterback 1 in year 2, he's quarterback 1 in year 3. Then in year 4, it's like, all right, maybe we'll bring in a low-level competition. And, he's quarterback 1, but he's on a short leash. That's the trap that teams fall into. That makes drafting Zach Wilson more dangerous, because if I pass on Mahomes for, a guard, I still may at least take my shot at a quarterback the next year or the year thereafter. Now, you're never going to get another Mahomes, but, at least you have an opportunity to get another quarterback. Now, the Jets did make the move for Aaron Rodgers, but Aaron Rodgers is 40 years old. That's not a long-term solution, and even then, the Jets still were doubling down on Zach Wilson, right? They didn't want to move on. They were under this pipe dream that, oh, don't worry, Rodgers will fix Zach Wilson. Okay. if that's what you want to say. So in concept, drafting a terrible quarterback is better than, drafting just, guard, linebacker, running back, any of those kind of safety. Really, to be honest, any position over the quarterback. If the quarterback has, if you have a need for a quarterback and or the quarterback has any kind of possibility of being a number one, way worse. But the way that teams approach the quarterback position with the young player, drafting a terrible quarterback probably has a worse impact on the team because teams are still working under the under the guise that it used to be like, when I mentioned Jamarcus Russell before, as if you have what would be the equivalent of a $40 or $45 million a year investment over the next 4 years guaranteed for that player, when the reality is you've signed him to, a 4-year contract worth $30 million, in total. Not $160 million guaranteed. All right, last question, I believe. Not sure if, to your point of a contract predictions for upcoming free agents, but what's your best guess for a Kirk Cousins contract? A lot of Kirk Cousins tonight. The person that mentioned a 1 year 30 guaranteed, I could see that. It would have some kind of incentives, in there as well that can bump that salary up. I think any kind of package that he would have would probably have the capability to max out at something like 40 or 45 if you make it all the way to Super Bowl. But I could definitely see doing a 1 year deal. If he does something longer term, it'll probably follow a similar path as the Garoppolo deal, where it'll have a lot of, injury protection if something happens with that Achilles again. But it'll be worth more than that. But, you might be looking at a deal that it does have a base value similar to what he's at now, which is about $35 million a year. And if that Achilles never gets injured, I firmly believe he would have made more than that. All right, so I think that's it. I'll just quickly look at my notifications here, but I think these are all questions that I covered. Yeah, I think these are all things that I already covered here, so should be good. So let's see what's here. There's people talking about Joe had mentioned about the worst Jets quarterback matchups ever in December. Now that we have Ritter versus Boyle or whatever here. But, I mentioned the worst game that I ever attended was Kellen Clemens, Brody Croyle. And I couldn't remember if this was a December or a January game. I did look it up. It was like December 30th. And I can still remember it. I mean, it was just two bad quarterbacks, bad teams. I think the Chiefs and Jets both had either 3 wins or 4 wins at the time going into that game. The game had a 4 p.m. start. It was a late start, so 4 p.m. probably, maybe 4:15. I don't know what they were at that time. It was a 4 o'clock game, last game of the year, 2 teams going nowhere. Kellen Clemens, Brody Croyle. It's cold. It's like a misting rain with occasional flurries in there. And since the game starts at 4, it's only feeling colder and colder as the evening goes on. They go to overtime. Both teams completely inept. The final score, I think, was 13-10. Stayed for the whole game. Tailgate was fun. Game, not so much. There was nobody there. I still remember the game. There were people sitting in front of us. I think 2 rows in front of us. Our tickets that year, we were in the lower bowl. Our tickets were kind of like between the 10-yard line and the front corner of the end zone, like in that section. I can't remember the section number. And they were 2 rows in front of us, and they brought an infant to this game. Be frozen solid. Now they had the kid there in it almost looked like a snowsuit, and just completely wrapped up in blankets. But I can still remember it, and I'm seeing these like some flurries come down. It's so cold, and it's like, man, how do you? And we did. I went to that game with my sister, brother-in-law, and my father, and at least I think that's who everybody that went. I know my sister and father were there. Probably my brother-in-law. We're there, and I'm just like, I'm sitting there watching, like, man, how are they doing that with a kid? Like, we don't have kids yet. Even I'm like, this doesn't seem like a good idea. We see a couple snow flurries come down, you see the rain, and troopers, you stick it out for those games. It was a game. That one was, something. I've seen some. I used to love going to the football games. The first year we had tickets, my friend had season tickets, was 1996, the year the Jets won a game. It wasn't a home game. They were in a couple games, but they always found a way to lose. It was the first game I ever remembered having a rain delay because, there started the lightning and thunder close to there. And the Jets, I think in that game, were kind of on the verge of scoring. And then Kyle Brady, I believe it was Jets tight end, fumbled in right around the end zone or something. That was the Jets' big hope. But that was the first year we had season tickets. I got them through my friend there. And then we went to the games for a couple of years, and you go sporadically. And then we got season tickets again, through somebody in 2002? Or was it 2004? No, it might have been 2004. It was probably 2004. I think I was still going to the random games in 2002. I go to a couple games on my friend's tickets. And, 2004, we had kind of got in. Someone had them, but we would buy them every year. And so we were always in the same seats from 2004 pretty much onward until the last year in the old stadium. And then we got our own because a lot of people didn't renew that time. Those were great seats. We were on the 50-yard line or 45-yard line for that season. That was fantastic. But it was just way too expensive to go into the new stadium. And it was like, I'm not going to bother. I can get tickets to a couple of games here and there. We'll do that. But yeah, I really enjoyed going. And, when Jacob gets a little bit older, I'm sure we'll go to a couple of games here and there. Hopefully the Jets will actually be better. Right now, though, of course, it's cheaper to get to go. But, it used to be fun, going with the tailgate. And, we didn't go with a big tailgate. We didn't go into all that. But we had, our little grill. And we had two grills we would take. We had a little grill and then a bigger grill. We had the TV we would set up. And, it was good because it gives you a chance to... go with people from your family and go with all that stuff. And, you hang out for 2 hours before a game or whatever it might be. Hang out, go to the game, have a good time, no matter how bad the Jets were. And then head home after that. So, that was 2007 was a season, man. That was a tough one. That was one of those. But, the Jets took it that year, and it was, the right call for them. They made the playoffs in 2006, and they didn't go overboard in 2007 trying to change things. They probably made the quarterback change too early because I think they were trying to manufacture something out of Kellen Clemens that clearly was never there. And they kind of let Pennington be the fall guy for some stuff, but that was a game. Anyway, trip down memory lane. So all right, everybody, have a great week. Hopefully I'll be back again next weekend, and we'll do another one of these. So everybody have a great week, and I'll talk to you all again soon.